Forgot to turn me on. There we go. That sound bad. Anyways, we're figuring it out. Last week, the whole streaming system that I used and I'm using today pooped its pants, crapped its pants. So, but they sent a big apology out to all the people who use their service, and today it is working like gangbusters. Also, I have a new audio interface, so I'm able to do really cool things
Just like this.
I'll promise to keep that to a minimum so we don't annoy people, but I'm going to let people keep funneling in really quick. We got Sean Hill joining us from YouTube, Dylan McGee, Danny M, and we're going to be reading reviews and thoughts, and maybe, just maybe, let me check. Oh, we got a Discord. I think we're going to have a guest on live, which is pretty cool. But today we're going to be talking about DC, The New Frontier, specifically that Volume 1. There you go. Not Volume 2, Volume 1, because I want to give people time. I thought about letting people know to read Volume 2, because these are not chunky books. You can get through them pretty quickly. But you know what? Hey, let's not dilly-dally. I'm going to just confirm with a guest that I'm going to bring on. Cool. I'll give you a heads up when it's time. Boom. Also, you're watching live, so I'll just give you a nod, and then I'll go ahead and call you in, which is pretty cool. All right, awesome. Let me just make sure this is still working. Who here? Sound off in chat. It's just so nice to have the loudest keyboard possible. You want the new Macs, but then you can't plug any USBs in that you actually want to, and then it's really loud anytime you do anything. And listen to that fan. You hear that? That's loud. TK joining us live. Thank you so much. And also, if you're from over on Periscope or if you're over in the Twitch, I appreciate you guys. Just say something. Say something. Thanks, Danny. All right, let's go ahead and kick it off. All right, so this series, I've been diving into comic series, graphic novels, books that I'm a big fan of, and so far we've done Sandman, which is revisiting, and my girlfriend joined me, which is pretty cool. Also, we checked out Giant Days Volume 1, because I'm a huge fan of that comic, as well as Lock and Key Volume 1, because the Netflix series that came out, the Season 2 green light that we got for that series, and it's just amazing. And there's going to be a crossover with Lock and Key and the Sandman universe, which that's gonna be pretty cool. And I'm pretty excited for whatever that's gonna end up being. I did read into it, but I don't want to say any spoilers in case people have not finished the Lock and Key series, either of them, or don't know Disney wants a surprise. So I'll go ahead and stop with that right now. But today we're gonna be talking about Darwyn Cooke's masterpiece, written and drawn, and I believe colored. Let's go ahead and just do a quick check on that one really quick, because I got the book in front of me. And it doesn't say. It doesn't say. It doesn't say. Well, regardless, the Darwyn Cooke drew and wrote this amazing story that cataloged and condensed down the entirety of early days DC Comics. Now, if you guys are familiar, there's different eras for DC Comics. You've got the Golden Age, Silver Age, then you have the more modern age after Crisis on Infinite Earths, and this story specifically focuses on the birth of the DC universe that we know, and it is much different from what we read now. But what Darwyn was able to do is take a lot of the older teams, older characters, maybe some characters that aren't that popular currently or haven't been used in decades, and marry them with more popular characters like the birth of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Green Lantern. Hal Jordan is our main, I'd call him the main character of the story. He is our viewfinder into this world, and we're able to experience not only the political landscape, but in a big sense it is the political landscape, but also the space race, and we're able to dive into racial relations, not with Hal Jordan, but with the character John Wilson, aka John Henry, which was an original creation for this book and is one of my all-time favorites. But I am getting ahead of myself. I want to say the things that work really, really, really well for this book. It's the art. Specifically, for me, at the top of the list is the art style. Darwyn Cooke's Art Deco homage to 1970s animation, 60s and 70s. Specifically, I'm thinking of the art style that was made famous for the intro sequence for The Witch TV show, where Bewitched, the intro sequence for Bewitched. Also, you can see some similarities that could be drawn between the Hanna-Barbera classic cartoons and this art style, but there's something homey about it. I know a lot of people are always like, oh, wouldn't it be great to live in the 1950s? Nope, it wouldn't. And also, even though this is a heightened reality, it's a pretty clear signal that, hey, probably wasn't great to live back then. But I think we get drawn to that kind of comforting view that we got through cartoons and older TV shows, and that's what this book is able to accomplish. That same emotional reaction that I had, at least. I can only speak for myself, but I do know that this is well regarded in the comic book industry, and also just fans everywhere get a kick out of what Darwin's able to accomplish within this book, because we're able to explore the entirety of early DC history, from the Justice Society, which is the precursor for the Justice League, as well as the introduction of also the disappearance of certain heroes like Shazam, aka Captain Marvel, or Batman, how he was feared by not only the criminals of Gotham, but also the world. And if it kind of answers that same question that has been asked a billion times already. Like, what if the superheroes actually existed in the real world? And you're like, okay, like, yeah, that's cool. But like, if you don't have like a really strong take, it just becomes like people beating the snot out of each other, and then broken bones, a lot of blood, a more modern president poo-pooing the actions of a superhero. You get it. You've seen it before. Watchmen, of course, is like the cornerstone, the bedrock of that concept, and it was one. And I'm not knocking Watchmen whatsoever, but yeah, I think we can all agree it's a bit of a bummer at certain points in that book, to put it lightly. And I think New Frontier is kind of like the antithesis to that in some ways. This is not an all like gung-ho rose-tinted view of how the history of America and the history of the world, going from the 1930s forward till about the 1960s. I feel like that's when our story ends, but it does have a more optimistic view of the world by the end of the story, because of the introduction of these heroes and the effect that they can have on American daily life, society, but also the world and what they can stand for. And you get to see what all of these different teams and heroes are able to stand for through each of their corners of the DC universe. So we'll kind of work our way through it. It opens with the Losers, which is a team that does not get any love, even though there was a loose adaptation starring Chris Evans back in the aughts called The Losers. It's a loose adaptation, but the idea of this kind of World War II era army team coming to find an ex-Nazi scientist because they want to build a bomb, they want to fight the bad guy. You know, you get it. It's a classic tale, but also there's a deep-seated love for pulp novels once these soldiers arrive on this Dinosaur Island, which Dinosaur Island is in like more modern comics. And although it is unfortunate that Darwyn Cooke passed away a few years ago, more recently there was a Superman comic that was a love letter to what he had meant to the author and the artist of the Superman comic. At the time, it was Pete Tomasi and Patrick Gleason. Whoo, that came out of nowhere in my brain. And Superman and his son John visit Dinosaur Island and meet one of the losers. But anyways, this whole adventure on Dinosaur Island is brief, but you get that somber look at warfare and what it means to be a warrior in like the truest sense, because like all these characters we never really meet ever again, besides Rick Flag, of course, and Rick Flag Sr. to be specific, because if you guys are familiar, in the Suicide Squad movie, that team is led by Rick Flag, but in this comic it's established that his father was the one who founded the original Suicide Squad, which was much more gung-ho adventurers, not so much making prisoners fight for their country against their will because bombs are in their brains. But I'm getting a bunch of notifications. That's good. All right, at least things are working on my end. And shout out to the Fisherman, Jay Shark, Dylan McGee, Tony Q, Danny M. Thank you all for joining us live, and please send your thoughts and questions in the chat. Dylan McGee just wanted to take a second to read a comment. I tried reading DC from the beginning, but it's nothing like what current comics are. It's just a bunch of small stories. When you would say it starts being similar to current comics. When would you say it starts being similar to current comics? Well, you try to read DC from the beginning. I want some clarification. You mean you started reading like classic comics, like Action Comics #1? Did you find like a copy of it? Or do you mean this specifically? And we can talk about that. Galen, thank you so much for joining as well. But anyway, getting back to the story, after our adventures on with the losers, and it's a bleak one. They're able to at least get Rick Flag off the island, and the rest of the soldiers unfortunately perish. Depending if you count that Superman story, you do meet one of them once again. But anyways, getting off track, we also start learning what the fallout of the Justice Society look like, because in our world, those comics stopped being published until the 60s, I'd say early 60s. And the reasoning in this world for them disappearing is due to McCarthyism and like the the Red Scare, and John McCarthy starting to try to oust the identities of certain masked vigilantes. And also in the early 50s, we see the death of Hourman after he's being chased by police, and it makes vigilantes not look so good. But as the story progresses, and it's also really cool seeing all the characters. And if you guys aren't familiar with this, during the era of the Justice Society, because this isn't the same for more modern comics, but Batman and Superman were at least interacting or in the same world as those characters. And in this comic, you find out how both of them responded to the U.S. government starting to crack down on communism and also vigilantism. So you see Superman and Wonder Woman joining up with the U.S. government while Batman goes underground, and Superman does hunt down Batman, and Batman's able to overpower him with kryptonite, because this was kind of around the era when they started introducing those elements. Anyways, when we get into Hal Jordan's story during the Korean War, you never really see comics dealing with the Korean War in any real way, besides maybe a flashback, but it's seeing how this affected Hal being a pacifist, but also being a soldier, because he wants to fly. He feels he has a duty to his country, but at the same time, he doesn't know if that necessarily means he should take a life. The entire sequence where he's taking on the North Korean soldier, even though the war's already ended, is pretty heartbreaking, and the art style is able to capture the emotion in each of the faces of the soldiers, but also you kind of see like just how small. I mean, I can't speak so much because I'm not a veteran, and no one in my immediate family has ever been I don't believe has been a soldier or has ever served, but the smaller moment you're able to see in this fight, in this war scene, it's more. Of course, war is never going to be fun or happy, but you can see just how depressing and, I don't know, just how dour it can be. I'm making sure I'm saying the right things here. But as it progresses, we also get the origin for Martian Manhunter, which is, this has changed in more modern comics, but this origin for Martian Manhunter, where he is accidentally teleported to an observatory and the scientist immediately dies, and Jean is left to his own devices to have to figure out how he's supposed to adapt to a new world. Like, it's beneficial that he's a shapeshifter and he's psychic, so he's able to pick up things from people's brains or read their emotions, and he's also able to hide himself. But the entire sequence where he's turning into the things he's seeing on TV, and he's also finding out that he's a big fan of sweets, but also pulp detective novels. I'm a big fan that he talks like a cartoon character, basically, and turning into Groucho Marx and Bugs Bunny is a nice touch. Because I haven't seen. Again, if you have not read this book, you should. This is a wonderful, wonderful book. But I do like that he immediately gets into the Gotham police force. I don't know if he's able to use his powers to do that, but regardless, I like that he is a detective, and we do get to see his interaction with the Batman, and you can see that it takes a good writer to really paint how scary seeing someone like Batman can be, because he can be silly, like an Adam West era blue-suited Batman dancing and surfing with the Joker, or you can see what looks to be a madman beating the snot out of criminals, and in this case, people who are trying to sacrifice a child. But also just want to give a shout out to my boy getting struck by lightning, Barry Allen, because his characterization and personality in this book is one of my all-time favorites, because you can just, the fact that he's like Iris, baby, he's kind of like I don't know, like he's a boy, like he's not a fully realized man. He is kind of a child. He's a 20-something. He has a girlfriend. He is a forensic scientist and forensic detective, but at the same time, like, he is kind of a mook. You know, he's got like his apartment is disgusting. He's just eating leftover food and watching Johnny Thunder, which I'm gonna guess is maybe a shout out to one of the early speedsters for DC Comics. But during this sequence, we get to see him run to Las Vegas and take on Captain Cold. That whole sequence is amazing. The way they realize his powers, the way he's able to vibrate through like telephone poles and rocks, and that's why he's not able to trip, or he's not killing animals or bugs as he's running. It just kind of makes sense, and I like when a writer's able to distill down a character's essence that well. also Ted Grant, aka Wildcat, in that boxing match. It's pretty brutal, and the entire sequence is great. Seeing some of the older JSA characters, as well as Black Canary and Selena Kyle dating Batman. All of it. Yeah, I'm a big fan. Cam Sense is saying the best depiction of Barry Allen. Yeah, it's my personal favorite iteration of Barry Allen, and the art style for his speed is just perfect. I have watched the New Frontier DC movie, which I'd recommend because some of those DC movies are pretty good. I think the book is better. I do think the book is better, but I know Darwyn Cooke was a consultant on the animation and also the story because it is adapted slightly differently than the way the book tackles the story, and both have their merits, so well worth checking out. Yeah, beat you to it, Dylan. Yeah, asking if I had seen the movie. I had seen it before I had read it because I wasn't familiar with it, but when I saw the little teaser for it, I was way on board with it. Now, here's a shout out to the Challengers of the Unknown. They are mentioned in the movie, but as someone who was not familiar with that team, that classic DC team, which had a revival recently, but that book got canceled real fast, I was not familiar with these adventurers, and it just kind of becomes clear that the DC early days had just different teams of people that would go to mysterious islands or encounter aliens or underwater creatures or dinosaurs, and they were all just different haircuts for different people. Occasionally there'd be a girl there, but occasionally. The Challengers of the Unknown, though, the kind of Twilight Zone Twin Peaks feel to their encounter with each other, these men who were able to survive a plane crash, but they're always being drawn back to the same place, and they choose to work together. I'm a big fan of it. Also, God, look at that double page spread. Ooh, it's beautiful. That's the crash scene for the Challengers. And also, like, we don't really dive further into the Challengers of the Unknown, but like I've mentioned before, this is meant to kind of set the table for early days DC teams, and I can just appreciate it for what it is. Also, we get to see Carol Ferris and Hal on a date, and he ends up getting a job with Ferris Air. But also, following this is the introduction of John Wilson, aka John Henry, and it's pretty harrowing. I didn't know we were going to be like diving into race relations during this era, but I felt once we got to Darwyn Cooke's Cronkite character giving an explanation of who John Wilson is on the nightly news, it became really clear why they were doing this, because the nostalgic view we have of America, I feel, you can also correct me on this if you'd like in the comments, but we tend to focus on the victories in certain war games and war scenarios, and it's we feel proud of that. But during the same time, we were treating our own citizens like this. People were being lynched, and the KKK was able to dole out mob justice, and there weren't people who were supporting people of color, specifically Black Americans, but also other people of color as well. And I'm glad the way that they tackle it in this book. But I would like to hear if people have criticisms of how they dealt with that storyline in this book. I would also like to hear it as well. It might not be it wouldn't be best for me to maybe dive into that, but I would like to hear other people's takes on it. But moving on, we do dive more into the Challengers of the Unknown, like fighting monsters outside New York. I am flipping through this. I'm not trying to just read the book to you guys. I'm just trying to make sure that I hit all the key points, like when we see Rick Flag and Hal Jordan teaming up, and we get to see John Henry's first costume reveal, where he's wearing the black hood with the noose that was used to try to kill him, and the two hammers, and using the John Henry song, or you can call it, I guess, a poem or the folktale, as the cadence for reading the story. I think it hit me the most emotionally as I was reading this, to hear him trying to break the machine, and the machine in this case being the local government, the state government, the federal government, that wasn't looking out for its own citizens and was allowing the KKK to do this, to go out and kill people or scare people to move away from their towns because of their prejudices. And it's not going to be a happy ending for John Wilson, but I did like the setup for this. And again, the art, I don't know how else to praise it by saying hot damn. But I did like when we move forward seeing John Jones watching a picture where he sees the sorry, I'm laughing already. I'm laughing ahead of myself, but I did like seeing him watching the humans, Earthlings' interpretation of a Martian, and he sees it as a joke. He's like, yeah, of course, like, this is ridiculous. You can see the strings, but he can't really out himself yet. He can't really expose who he is to the general public. But I do like as we get to explore that through the series. But yes, anyways, we get to learn that we're on our way to Mars because of John, because we found evidence of John at that observatory, which was a really cool reveal. And I like the way that they're connecting all of these stories together. And we meet Faraday, which was an original creation for this book, along with John Wilson, who is our like point person for NASA, as well as the OSS, the precursor to the FBI. And they're planning to go to Mars to figure out what's there, to nuke it, to bomb it, to attack them. Who can say as of right now? But we do get John reading the book from the cult that Batman had broken up, the cult that were trying to sacrifice the child to the center. And we get to learn more about this being, this large being that's been here since the beginning of time on Earth. And John's gonna try to figure out a way to tell somebody. I don't know, but that's the book ends at that point. But also, it's worth mentioning Wonder Woman trying to have a confrontation with the president and his cabinet, and about what her role is. And also, I feel bad for skipping this so late in the game, but her whole confrontation with Superman. There is some contention between comic book fans and creators about the way Wonder Woman should dole out justice, whether it be violently or with love, or maybe she only uses a lasso and a shield, or she does use a sword. All iterations, I'll be honest, I'm a fan of, just depending if the writing is good. And I do think I lean more towards the Wonder Woman that just uses the shield and just uses the lasso. I do like that, and I think that's more true to what the original version of Wonder Woman. But I do like the iteration of Wonder Woman in this, when she's helping the women in Southeast Asia. They were being held in prisons, and she just allows the women to liberate themselves, in a sense that like they can either kill their captors or let them go, and the women make the decision, and Wonder Woman is sitting behind them, and also calls Superman out for his lack of knowledge and experience on certain political issues and societal struggles for different people that aren't him, because he is Superman. And I really do like those scenes. And also that scene in the movie, I think, is well realized as well. It is more violent, so I was surprised at being in an animated movie, but I did appreciate it. And also, just one more time, just for the folks at home, let's take a look at that art, because that's hard to turn the page, and I really don't want to rip this page. But look at that. I just want it tattooed on my body. I want my whole house to be looking like all these pieces. Oh, look at Martian Manhunter just watching a little TV. He's just eating cookies and making a mess in that dead scientist's apartment. But Volume 1 is such a good start, and also as it progresses in Volume 2, you get to see like the U.S. government starting to crack down on other metahumans. They do take on the Center, and you get to learn what that is. You get to learn more about the Suicide Squad, or the early day Suicide Squad, and Themyscira. And John Wilson's story does not end well, but what it means for the future, there is a glimmer of hope. And I'll keep it at that. And I do recommend checking out Volume 2. I did want to give a shout out to Tono Q, Alexandra, Dylan McGee, Jay Shark, Danny M. Actually, Danny M., if you're still down, I want to give you a quick call, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. So let me go ahead and get you queued up. Let me turn on that. Man, it's so cool having a soundboard. That's pretty fun. And while we do this, please let me know in the comments down below what other books you guys would like me to check out, and I would gladly take those suggestions. So I'm going to go ahead and... Did this connect automatically? Danny, you there? Well, we'll see if he connects. But
Hello?
Danny, can you hear me? Maybe he can't. Hold on. Let's see. Settings... Voice. There we go. Can you hear me? Danny? Danny, can you hear me? Hello? Yeah, I can hear you, but I just don't think you can hear me. Can you hear me
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me through the stream?
Hey, Sam. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, we tried. Let's try one more time. You guys are the best for hanging out in the chat, but make sure you guys... How about this? Nothing? How about this? Can you hear me? No.
Hey Sam.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. There we go. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great.
There we go. It just took a second. All right, let me pull up the chat one more time. But Danny, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let us know your podcast.
Hey, I'm Daniel Martinez at Echo Spider on Twitter, and I run a comics podcast called Next Issue Podcast. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for hopping on, man. I appreciate it. Now, when did you first check out DC's The New Frontier?
I think it was when the movie came out. I watched the movie, and then I was like, "Oh, this is good."
Mm-hmm.
So let me go check out the comic book because it usually worked that it's better when from the source material, and it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and where does this rank in terms of like some of your favorite graphic novels from DC? Do you kind of lean more towards the darker, grittier stuff, or is this one pretty high up there?
Well, I mean, it's funny you say that because this is this can get pretty dark
Yeah.
too, right? Like even though there's a lot of like you get a book where you deal with a lot of the racial violence and stuff, but then you also like you go to a dinosaur island.
Mm-hmm.
So so
It's all over
this
the
book
place.
kind of has it all. Like, yeah, you feel the influence of like Watchmen and the Dark Knight Returns, like all that. Always this the book just give the comment because it's very good. It's very good for you to like come into the medium.
I think it's a good starting point as well. If that, because you kind of broke up there for just a second, but I think it's like a really solid starting point for any readers because it's just a good encapsulation of what DC can stand for, the kind of stories that they're able to tell, the kind of characters that they have, and it's also just there's a lot of hope seeped in there without being too rose colored, if that makes sense. Where we're able to tell true stories about the world in heightened situations, and hopefully people learn a lesson. Then that for comic book fans, that's not always that's not always the truth, but you always hope people can learn the right thing from the things that you're creating. I think you got disconnected there, but can you hear me? I'm gonna try one more time.
Yeah, I'm still here.
All right, there
I'm
we
still
go.
here.
Cool. What are some of your favorite, or what is one of your favorite moments from DC: The New Frontier?
I think one of the coolest things here, other than like Catman fighting with Cassius Clay,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is always pretty cool. I think just Hal Jordan. This may be the my favorite version of him. Ever like the rebirth stuff is really cool with him, and when they bring him back. But this is just so good. He kind of it's yeah. I think it's the most polished version of him, and I think just doing that it's pretty cool. The inclusion of some of those weirder, more obscure teams like the losers and the challengers, and later on like Suicide Squad. That's just something that doesn't normally happen, especially at that time. Like this is before popular the Suicide Squad was like popular at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, there was like
uh,
there's a version of the Suicide Squad that was kind of popular at the time, but nowhere near what it is now.
oh
Um,
yeah,
and the challengers, like even watching the movie and reading this, I was like, I gotta look it up. I gotta look up what these are. I understood what the losers were more than I understood what the challengers were. But I fully agree with Hal Jordan because he's kind of like, to put it more bluntly, he's kind of like a quarterback that for the Justice League. He's very hot headed. He's very
yeah,
he's the jock, and he does have moments of air quote weakness, but really it's just kind of him being a dick in different situations. So it's just like I don't know. Like I don't I like Green Lantern stories uh for the cosmic big bombastic storylines. But in this, I fully agree with you. It's the most like polished, most realized version of the character and what it could mean to be a Green Lantern. It's a character that has to overcome their own shortcomings in order to like will the world they want to see into existence. And like there are some like more alien elements, but I like that it's not till like near the end of volume 2 we even get to that. It's more about a man realizing what his place is in the world and what he's able to do to change it. Um, And yeah, I fully agree. I think it's my favorite version of Hal Jordan, and I think if they did, whenever they do make a Green Lantern show or movie, whenever that's going to happen, it's going to happen. But whenever it does, I hope there is a blueprint taken from this comic specifically. I think it would be the most dynamic and the most interesting to use in a medium, personally.
For sure. Yeah.
But really
No,
quick,
I agree. I agree.
as I'm kind of wrapping up here, I think I'm going to try Zoom next time because that works a little bit better. It's a little bit smoother. But I appreciate you hopping on. One more time, where can people find you and what's your podcast?
You can find me personally at Twitter at Echo Spider, and you can find my podcast at Next Issue Pod. We have an episode about Judd Winnick, the comic book writer, that's coming up this week. And the reason we're doing that is because I didn't know he was in the real world,
Oh,
like in season 1 or 2,
me neither.
which is weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like a lot of my co-hosts are a little bit older than I am, so like they were watching at the time. So yeah, it just from there we're like, oh, let's talk about Judd Winnick. So yeah, that's coming up soon. Thanks, Sam.
Awesome. Where can people find it?
At Next Issue Pod, you can find all the links to like Apple and Spotify, all that stuff.
Hell yeah. Danny, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and knock it off here on Discord and just do a quick roundup, but I'll talk to you later this week. Thanks, man.
Take care, man. Thank you.
Danny, good boy. Danny is a good boy. All right, let's go ahead and wrap it up here, gang. Thank you so much for joining me. Please, in the comments down below or on Twitter at Sam Basher, let me know what you guys would like to hear me talk about in the future. And if you guys would like to join me, please tweet at me, let me know. And I'll use Zoom next time. It'll be a little clearer. And also, I can bring you up on the feed. You can put your face on the video, which is cool. And also, if you guys would like, I can kind of dive into Volume 2 as well, just because just all of it, man. It's just also so good. Also, when I was visiting Portland, I went to Powell's Books. If you guys are not familiar, it's an independently owned bookstore that's enormous, and it's really cool. And once all this virus stuff calms down, I would very much like to go and visit Portland one more time, center myself and visit Powell's and buy a bunch of books. But when I was there and I bought these two paperback covers, I found one giant hardcover version that it was like a little pricey, but I should have gotten it then because then when I went back there, it wasn't there, and it was, and also I haven't done a good job looking for it, just being totally honest. But that's what I'm looking forward to. Anyways, let me know what you guys would like me to read in the future, who you would like to see on the show, and other pieces of content. Just because, hey, I'm having fun with this, and I've got a cool setup right now. So, gang, stay safe, wear a mask, wash your hands, eat your vegetables, eat some greens, drink some water, and I will see you guys next time. Let's cut to some tunes. Wait, hold on, I can cue it up way better than this. Hold on. No, wait, hold on. Turn that down, turn that on, turn this on, transition me out, turn my volume down while this goes up.